President Trump says he's spoken to European and Asian leaders on tariffs. His administration says more than 50 countries have contacted the White House to try to negotiate on trade after the president announced sweeping tariffs last week.
The blanket 10% tax on imports came into effect on Saturday, while steeper tariffs from many countries will kick in on Wednesday. And the moves have already triggered some retaliatory levies. Mr. Trump's economic officials have urged investors to remain calm as fears of a recession grow. But the sweeping tariffs have wiped out around $6 trillion in value from U.S. stocks. The White House denies the tariffs are an attempt to crash the market in order to pressure the Fed to cut interest rates.
For a closer look at the fallout from the tariffs, we welcome Marc-Andreas Muendler. He is professor of economics at the University of California, San Diego. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on a Sunday, your time. I want to start by asking you about that line. More than 50 countries in the queue. Reaching out apparently to try and talk about, those tariffs. But do they know what they are queuing up for? I mean, is there clarity? Because, we understood something last week. It changed a little bit. The messaging was mixed. And if the ultimate goal ultimately is to raise revenue to offset potential, taxes which may be lost, and also bring manufacturing back to the United States, don't tariffs have to be permanent?
So the tariffs would be more permanent if they had been approved by congressional law. Last time, the United States raised tariffs by about 20% on average, like this time. Last time was with the Smoot-Hawley Act that was in Congress. This time, the orders are based on laws that allow for emergency measures and give the president a relatively free hand. The executive order from April 2nd is pretty long. I read it twice now carefully. And it does include a number of caveats that suggest the tariffs that the United States imposed now are not meant to be permanent, but would be changed in response to foreign countries reducing their tariffs on U.S. goods. That is in the executive order. It comes up at different points. And in that sense, I think the messaging has been consistent. And it is the right thing for foreign countries, I think, to first reach out and check for negotiation possibilities before launching into retaliation and getting into a trade war indeed.
Okay, but is there time though, Professor, because 3 days before the second stage kicks in on Wednesday, and we also have the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent himself, saying over the weekend that unfair trade practices are not the kind of thing you can negotiate away in days or weeks. So does it look like it's going to be inevitable, those new tariffs kicking in on Wednesday?
The current administration is hard to predict. You asked me to predict them. I'm not sure I can, but I would venture to say that the announced tariffs will probably kick in. They will be meant, I hope, as an opening to a process of negotiations. Some countries have declared they will not retaliate. The United Kingdom is one of them. Some seem reluctant. I think Australia is one of them. India might be one of them. And Europe is not speaking with a single voice. So we will see what comes out there. I do think that many foreign trade partners still hold out the hope that the expected increase in tariffs next week, or this week for you, there will be temporary, and that negotiations are a possibility. Of course, you said correctly that that would mean that the tariff revenues that are coming in, that are expected to come in under the tariffs, will be lower, and the promised tax cuts will have to be financed differently. But I take those caveats in the executive order seriously and literally, and they do say that negotiations are meant to happen.
Professor, you said it, this administration is hard to predict. So given the uncertainty surrounding the duration of these tariffs, what are the potential financial and operational implications for both U.S. businesses and trading partners during this period of ambiguity?
That is, I think, the main cost of doing things the way they're being done now, namely announcing tariffs, putting them in place, and then negotiating for the reduction. They raise the uncertainty for businesses. If indeed the tariffs were permanent, as they say under the laws in Congress in the late 1920s, as Smoot-Hawley used to be, then businesses would adjust, retool their supply chains, reconsider their pricing and their locations. That's not the case. So I think indeed business will have to live with uncertainty. It will mean that decisions won't be taken drastically soon, but it also means that I think many businesses will delay their investment choices, their employment choices, their location choices, and that will weigh on the economy.
Professor, Trump's team insisting that this short-term economic disruptions will be outweighed by the long-term benefits of the tariffs. Do you think the administration's optimism is realistic?
Well, I do not know what is their intended endgame, and you can guess as much as I can, and certainly is big. If the endgame is indeed that major trade partners lower their tariffs on the United States, then the long term will be a better prospect. I'm not one to argue for zero tariffs. Governments need to be funded. They need to tax goods and services, labor income, capital income. And tariffs can be one of the taxes in the toolkit. 20% tariff increases suddenly are certainly not a sensible tax policy, but they are a possibility. So somewhat lower tariffs and trade partners, maybe slightly higher tariffs in the United States, would not be a bad long-term outcome. The pathway there is, I think, the difficult part, and the uncertainty is troubling.
Professor Muendler, I'm wondering, how much pressure Donald Trump himself and his team, of course, will be able to withstand. We saw nationwide protests. There were global demonstrations as well. We also know that $6 trillion in terms of market value was wiped out, and it looks like we're headed for another day of drops on Wall Street. So again, how much longer, or how long do you think Donald Trump will be able to hold out and convince the nation to hang in there?
Hard to say. The Congress is unusually muted. Foreign trade policy is actually the prerogative of Congress. They have ceded the powers to reset tariffs to Donald Trump in some sense by allowing the emergency measures to be based on the laws that are used. Given that Congress is not strongly active in opposition to the president's action, I think his administration has quite a long way to go. Compared to the protests in 2017, when Trump assumed office during his first administration, the protest numbers are smaller. And there is a significant voice among the working class in the United States that suggests that the short-term pain of maybe months or years is little compared to the plight of the manufacturing decline they suffered. I do not agree that it's fully attributable only to trade. There are many other changes, technological advances, productivity changes, and the shift of the economies towards more services that all explain why manufacturing employment declined so much until 2010. Since then, employment has actually been relatively stable, manufacturing employment in the United States. But that doesn't change the perception among many workers that in manufacturing, that they had a tough set of decades past, and that a few years of pain are not too harsh on them. So the administration, I think, has political capital to still spend on this, as risky as it is for the economy, as costly as it is for businesses having the uncertainty. There is still a way to go.
Okay, Professor, we're very well to leave it there, but thank you very much for your insight this morning. We've been speaking to Marc-Andreas Muendler, Professor of Economics at the University of California, San Diego.